All right, everybody, I'm Michael, I'm alcoholic. Let's pray it in. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. All right, we just come off the Big Book weekend, which was quite the bit. And a lot of people here had a lot to do with that. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody that helped out. And it was a good experience. We're going to do it again next year. We're going to change some things, make it a little bit more, I hate to use the word progressive, but it is what it is. And I'm sorry?
Exciting.
Yeah, we're going to make it more fun and stuff. But it was a great weekend, and a lot of some folks in here are on overload mode. They got so much Big Book this weekend, it's hard to digest it all. And then you come to the workshop here tonight. So thanks for showing up. And then the other folks, I don't know. Maybe they thought we weren't having a workshop because of the conference. Regardless, we are on step 11, and I'd like to do the tradition first. That way I won't forget it. And I think they're just vitally important. I think we would be benefited, our community would be benefited if we had more tradition talks and discussions and stuff like that. Like we have lots of Big Book discussions and discussions on any topic. We just have open topic, open speaker meetings, and those are fine by all means. But if we really need to have a discussion on the traditions, it'd really come to life for a lot of us. I really believe that. So tradition 11 says that our relations with the general public should be characterized by personal anonymity. We think AA ought to avoid sensational advertising. Our names and pictures as AA members ought not be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. Our public relations should be guided by the principle of attraction rather than promotion. There is never need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. And so I had a couple of guys that I sponsored. They were young fellas, and I don't know, this is about 10 years ago. And at the same time, we had heroin. We still have heroin, but it was like a really, people died people are still dying from drugs and alcohol, but there just seemed to be, around that time in our area, the overdoses were just a few a week, young people dying. It was just almost insane. We almost as a community got callous to it because it happened so much. So the first couple, you was like, oh my gosh. And then the next couple were like, oh man. And then the next couple was like, we got callous to it because it happened so regularly. And I don't know the number, but it was the number, it's still happening. And some communities are just now experiencing that overwhelming epidemic. But about 10 years ago, nevertheless, I was sponsoring a couple guys, came to AA. I think they were friends, and I think the court had sent them here, or rehab center. And they came to the room and they said, like we say, my name is so-and-so and I'm an addict. Because that's where their consequences that they saw, especially being young fellas, the consequences that even brought them to the meeting had everything to do with their heroin usage. And so that was a different meeting. That was the Fellowship of the Spirit meeting down the road here. But they came and we decided as a home group that because it was so overwhelming, if you didn't have a home group meeting and you didn't know how to deal with that, then you did either two things. And the two things that you did was you didn't do nothing. So you just let whoever come in, AA, and say, my name is Addict, and nobody said nothing. Or you'd let them do that, and they'd go to another meeting, and some old crusty alcoholic would say, you can't say that here, and chase them off. And so both of those, needless to say, are just as bad as the other. And so to some degree, there is a solution for that, and that's we are responsible as members of Alcoholics Anonymous to help the new people to be able to identify as alcoholics. And if you're a newcomer, like I was a newcomer, or these newcomers are coming into AA, if they resembled anything like me, then they have no idea what an alcoholic is. And so they come in, I got all my problems are from drugs. They say they're an addict. We, as a home group, kind of voted to pull those folks aside to discuss with them what is an alcoholic? What is an addict? What's the difference? Are you an alcoholic? Let's help you see where you stand at. And 9 times out of 10, what we found out on that was we had to be very gentle, because they've already had the stigma, they've already had the sour looks, they've already had all that stuff kind of happen by saying they're an addict in AA. And I don't think the people necessarily love the program that saved them, and they try to preserve it, I suppose, just to not belittle their approach. And so you had to be very gentle when you talk to these folks, because they already had an idea of, what their past experience was, and it wasn't pleasant. And so 9 times out of 10, nevertheless, when you started to talk to them about a physical allergy and a mental obsession and a spiritual malady and what happens to you when you take a drink, you know what I mean? We know you're an addict. We know you did drugs. You said it. We get that's what you believe. But what happens to you when you take a drink? You see? And 9 times out of 10, more than 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, those folks would say, "Oh, I never knew that's what an alcoholic was. I thought because my consequences are all from drugs that made me an addict and not an alcoholic." And the same thing happened to me for years and years and years, was that my alcoholism, which is very cunning, baffling, and powerful, like all of our alcoholisms, my alcoholism, so subtly destructive that it hid behind the lie that I'm a drug addict and I'm not an alcoholic. And so consequently, I stayed sick. My alcoholism never got a solution, and I kept relapsing and didn't understand why. So it's very confusing. If you're an Alcoholics Anonymous and you're here and you gather a length of sobriety and no one's been able to differentiate those two things for you, you could be sober for years in Alcoholics Anonymous and still wonder what's going on there. Still not understand what makes you a real alcoholic. If you did a consensus today in any community across the world of Alcoholics Anonymous and you ask people, what's the first step? They'll be able to read you the step off the wall, but you're going to get so many different answers about what being powerless means. And is that good or bad? It's neither here nor there, I suppose. But if you're an alcoholic, like the Big Book describes, the Big Book and the fellows this weekend, they really hit it hard. They said, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. And Bob said it. He said, sometimes that takes years. Sometimes that takes years. I mean, I could pick out several people in this room right now that I know that has taken them years to fully concede. And the cheat, if there is a cheat, did not have to take you years and years and years to fully concede your innermost self that you're an alcoholic. The cheat, I don't hate to call it a cheat because we all got the same, like me and Johnny were talking. Believe it or not, we all got the same book. We all got the same book. And the information is the same in the same book. Even in the solution, we have a solution on which we can absolutely agree. Anyway, these guys become excited, just like anybody else who finally understood what the problem was. And then when you come to Alcoholics Anonymous and you finally realize what the problem is, you get excited about the solution. Most of the time, guys have been beat up for years and years and years, wondering, what's wrong with me? Ladies, same thing. What is the matter with me? I did it again. Oh. And then we go back and we muster up a little bit of strength or courage or whatever it takes to go try again, and we fail again, and we say, what's the matter with me? I must need medication or something. And a lot of times that answer is simply, you're an alcoholic and you just don't know what it is. Anyway, These guys were in that program. I don't know what it was. I can't remember. But they came to Alcoholics Anonymous. They were able to identify as alcoholics. They started working the program. And their lives, like anybody else's who would come to Alcoholics Anonymous to start working the program, consequently, their lives, they become blessed. They started to feel the favor and power and abundance of a loving God and a loving fellowship. And these were young guys. And so they got a lot of attention because of it. And they got the attention of 19 Action News. And and they called and said, we're going to be on the news. They want to do an interview on us. What are we going to do? I said, do the interview. But we have a tradition to help us, we are to remain anonymous. And they didn't mention, when they mentioned how they got sober, they said a 12-step program. They didn't say they were members of Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't use their last names. They did the interview from behind them instead of in front of them with their faces. And so they took the proper precautions traditionally to not only protect themselves, but they did it. Luckily, I had a sponsor to show me these things so that I could show them. And so they did the interview. The interview went on the TV a couple times that day or whatever, very successful. They did what they were supposed to do. Now, the good news, that's to some degree, that's the gist of the story, but there's more. The more is they fell into the same trap that a lot of us alcoholics do after a time of sobriety and a new relationship or a new car or something shiny. They stopped doing the things that we have to do, and both of them went back out. Both of them. And they were on fire. And so they're out doing whatever we do when we do what we do. But Alcoholics Anonymous is safe because of the precautions that they took on that interview. And so if they was at the heroin house or the bar or wherever they may end up, and somebody would say, I remember you from 19 Action News. You're the young fellow who got sober in AA. I know your full last and first name. Right? What happened? And then they would have a story to tell. And consequently, what would happen in that scenario was it would embrace doubt in the program and power of Alcoholics Anonymous. You see? And so in order to protect the program is 100% successful. I really do believe that. The problem with the program is there's people in it. Right? It's us. And so they preserved through the few little suggestions that they took. They were, wherever they end up, nobody knows who they were. They did do a good interview at the time. It was good on TV. It was a great story. It was wonderful. But they remained anonymous. They didn't do any of that. And so that's what that tradition's about. If I'm to fail, and my name is, whatever, and everybody knows I'm a member, all the public knows that I'm an alcoholic, and I do get caught speeding or fighting or arguing, or I get jammed up somewhere and I'm not behaving how I'm supposed to because I'm an alcoholic and it's gonna happen, then what happens is I'm gonna make AA look bad, you see? And so we try not to do that because the tradition goes on to say that this is a program of attraction rather than promotion. And so nobody's attracted to, most of the time when drama hits, maybe everybody's like, I don't want nothing to do with that. And they go the other way. And so we preserve the program with our anonymity. And we preserve that with that. Steve, you got your hand up, buddy?
Yeah, I was just saying, the thing about AA that I like, and it works great for me, that's one thing about the program.
Thank you, Steve. There is never a need to praise ourselves. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to this step tonight. But one of the, God gets the credit. As soon as I start taking credit for my life today, then if I start taking credit for the life today, then I'm going to quit doing the things to be able to, that got me the life I have today. It's going to happen. Make sense? Any questions, Tradition 11? Okay. Okay, step 11. Any questions on anything up to this point in the workshop? We've been going week after week here. It's been going good. I've heard some great, feedback from what we've been doing here. If you stayed current with the work, I'm sure you're going to have an experience. You're going to have an experience. Just, by all means, you're welcome to attend this like it's a lecture. It's not meant to be a lecture. It's more to be all I'm doing is sharing my experience with the program, and then you take the action, and you're going to have your own experience with the program, pretty much. So let's start tonight with. And my sponsor talked about this weekend, where before, to my understanding, there's a couple of fellas, I think it was in the 70s or in the 80s, and they were named Joe and Charlie. Everybody heard of Joe and Charlie. And I could be wrong about this, and if I'm wrong, just tell me. But prior to them doing the workshops that they did, the Joe and Charlie Big Book workshops, and they did the same thing, kind of what we're doing here today, but there was just two fellas, and the thing that got them excited was they seen that they had this blue book with a program of action, and Alcoholics Anonymous had gotten so far away from that they started doing these workshops. And to some degree, had it not been for those workshops that Joe and Charlie done, all these different movements of where the Big Book is making a comeback in Alcoholics Anonymous may have not happened. Because it was so far away from what our program described for us to do, it just got crazy. And so up until, I think Bob had mentioned this weekend, until the 80s or 70s, where most people would say, I do my 10th step at night. And depending on where you're from or what your sponsorship lineage is, you're going to still hear the same things, which is fine. It's just not what our book says to do. And it's not what our program suggests that we do. Is there any wrong time to do a 10th step? Probably not. The first word is what? In the 10th step, we continue, right? Continue. When is continue? That's all the time. And so anytime you feel off, agitated, out of place, the Big Book would say we watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, not if, but when, because they do, we have a few actions to take. And that kind of goes, that is kind of a step that is constantly alive and constantly awake in our lives throughout our daily life. Now, there's some similar inventory pieces in our 11th step, but they are different steps. And so the 11th step would read, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And so there's a lot going on here. We're going to read some of that, but the 10th step and the 11th step are not the same. I think the 11th step and the 10th step are they really always get jumbled up into one. I hear that more often. That would be the most thing I probably hear that would not line up with what our Big Book says. There's a fella, one of his one-liners was, don't let anybody read your Big Book for you. That was his famous one-liner. And what he meant by that, first when I heard that a few times, I was like, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Who reads my Big Book for me? You know what I mean? What is he talking about? And what he meant when he said that was, when you hear these different things in the meetings or wherever we may go, look in the Big Book and see if it's in there for yourself. You are responsible for that. You have a disease called alcoholism that's literally trying to kill you. You have to take some responsibility for your sobriety. And so go in there and look. The Big Book is pretty clear about resentment being a number one offender. It kills more alcoholics than anything else. It uses very strong language. Death kills, you see. And so if you're a sober alcoholic and you cop a good resentment and you harbor it, it actually has the power to kill. It really does. Not only that, but alcoholic, the rate of suicide, I believe the statistic for the rate of suicide of alcoholics is 70% higher than the national average, which is a lot. That's not a 3% or something, which would be a large number when you're talking about such a wide population. But the number, I believe, is 70%.
It is. We looked it up 2 years ago.
70%. So thank you. Why? Bob also said something this weekend. They said, you know what the number one cause of relapse is? The number one cause of relapse. If anybody remember what he said? Sobriety. Sobriety is the number one cause of relapse, right? We come in here and we get sponsors and we start working steps. A lot of us, my experience is, if you're like me, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for years and years and years and had no idea what was the matter with me. I had no idea what alcoholic was, zero. And I'd get these sponsors and they'd say, do you believe you're an alcoholic? And they'd say, yeah. And they'd take me on to step 2 and they'd give me the classic 1, 2, 3 shuffle. Do you believe God can restore you to sanity? Yeah, okay. Go on to step 3. You make a decision. Are you ready to turn your will in your life? And I would do it and then I would be done. The 1, 2, 3, back to 1. 1, 2, 3, back to 0. 1, 2, 3, over and over and over and over. So much so that I said what anybody in my shoes would say. When somebody would say, won't you go back to AA? AA don't work. And in God's grace and power and love or whatever, somehow got me back. Because I know a ton of people that didn't make it back. I mean a ton. They die. When me and Rachel go to Florida about every year, we go down to the Keys and we go fishing and, boat around or do whatever we do. And they have such a good AA community down there. It's a little different than being in the city. And we talked about this down there with those folks. We have a really good relationship with them. And this kind of came up. And the difference is I'm sure that people die there too, but we see it more in the cities. We see it more in the areas where there's denser populations. And so the value and the priority and the importance of these things is simply that if you see a few people die that you're close to, if you see your friends die, people that you came in the program with, it takes on a little bit more seriousness. It just does. And so it's important, and I've been called, hey, you probably heard things about me, and I'll just go ahead and just take the cut off for you. The things you heard about me, they're probably true. They're probably true. I never claimed to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm an alcoholic. I don't qualify I surely don't qualify to be doing this. You see, I just don't. And the only thing that, I don't know, people ask me to do these things, I'm honored to do them, and I just do them. And does that make me, I do not walk on water. I am imperfect as you just have to smoke a cigarette with me. You just got to hang out with me just for a little bit, you see, and you'll see that. And so, nevertheless, that is important because when we get up to this step 10 and we get to this step 11, what happens is we peter out. And there's a lot of different reasons why, and there's so many, and I'm going to try to talk about a couple of them. But by this time, you're early sober, you've been failing your whole life. You're used to failing, and failing, the big book will call it pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And you get sober and you work some steps, you get your 4th step done, you did your 5th step, you're walking on a cloud. And then what happens? You start making a little bit of money. You get your driver's license back. You're being able to show up to work on time regularly. You get the promotion. Things happen when you're living by spiritual principles. Quite obviously, things are going to start to happen in your favor. That's just what happens. And a lot of times, what happens as a result of that is we peter away. The step 10, doing it regularly, is oftentimes, especially in our community, extremely misunderstood. And so depending on, you could be at work and you can't get a hold of your sponsor because your sponsor's at work or wherever he's got going on or she's got going on, and you're tripping out and you go to the bathroom or whatever and you're saying, I got to make a 10-step call. And you go into the phone because they told us to get numbers, and we got numbers and we got 1,000, and we find the first, oh, I remember so-and-so. Hey, so-and-so, I got to do a 10-step. And they don't know what it is. And you're bugging out at work and you're fearful and resentful and you done snapped out on the boss and you got to get this off of you to make it through the rest of the day. And the first couple people you call don't even know what you're talking about. And being as a newcomer in sobriety, that can be quite confusing. Quite confusing. And there's no possible way that we are going to be able to change that like that. There's not, we can put billboards along Route 8 and say the 10th step says this, all the way down to Marietta. You'd be like, what the hell is going on? And you might not still get it, you see? How we change that disservice, because that's what I'm going to call it, is one alcoholic at a time. All problems in Alcoholics Anonymous has been said to be able to be solved by one thing and one thing only, and that one thing is good sponsorship. And so whether you understand that or realize it or not, as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, you are 100% responsible and called, and it is your duty to carry that message that was carried to you, wherever you got it. Through a sponsor, through workshops, wherever you're learning what you're learning and what's working for you, we become very accountable for that. That information is very vital, life-saving, and whether you know this or not, you are 100% responsible to give that away. And so, if we sponsor our people, if these new folks are coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, or we do these workshops, or we go to these workshops, or we go to these, we do our talks and we get to share our stories. And what are we sharing, really? We're sharing how we worked the steps and God became real to us and revolutionarily changed our thoughts and actions and attitudes and everything. That's what happened for all of us. And so we go to so to some degree, it's been said that it's a pep rally for God. It's just a program of attraction, just like we read in the tradition that I'm to share. I don't want to go to any meeting. It's all boring and terrible. And if a new guy comes in, I want to make sure there's some kind of a zeal there. There's some kind of a zeal in my own sobriety to make it exciting for you. That's my job. And sometimes people, there's different personalities. And if you like everybody, then you ain't been to enough meetings, for sure. And I got news for you. Everybody don't like you. And the other news is you don't like everybody. That's just kind of the truth. And it's unfortunate. It's just the truth. But we have, like the big book says, we have something on which we can absolutely agree. We have a program that works. And so we're responsible to share these 10th step ideas, with the program, what it would suggest us to do. Because if in my 16 years of sobriety, I have made more mistakes sober by leaps and bounds and mountains than I ever made when I was drinking. I made some stupid mistakes drinking. I did the same. All I did was drink. So I drank, and I got the consequences from drinking. And to some degree, and I said this jokingly the other day, we was over to the intergroup office, I said I drank so much and alcohol consumed my life so much that I didn't get to participate in the rest of the sins. Does that make sense? I didn't get to participate in the rest of the sins. So what do you think would happen for a guy like me who could sober, and now there's all these new flashy, chartreuse. I say that color, it's my favorite color, fishing lure. These are these attractive new sins that I never got to participate in. So I bid on them just like a fish would, and I got jammed up and so forth and so on. And I mentioned that because when I did get jammed up, luckily, I was tied in with a good lineage of sober people who were big book based. I'm so grateful for that. Like just in talking about that today, had it not been, I don't think I'd be here. I just don't. I already believed when I came to AA that AA wasn't going to work. I really believed it. I've tried it so many times, and I'm so very grateful I fell in with a group of people who were studying the big book and doing what Ken say, the black writing on the white pages in the blue book. Yeah, he said that over and over, and boy, that's a powerful statement, because that's what they taught me to do, and they took me through it, and they read it. They did read it to me. They read me the big book. They read it to me, and then they'd read a few lines or a paragraph, and they'd stop and they'd share their experience. And it was like made the big book come to life for me. And I'm so very grateful. So then a few years later, when a guy says, don't let anybody read your big book for you, I'm like, what are you talking about? It's too late. You know what I mean? It's too late for that. Obviously, he didn't mean that. But I had people, when I got myself into new trouble, new financial struggles, and new relationship problems, and new parenting problems, and new what we would sum up and for us alcoholics would call problems of prosperity. Kids and money and relationships and all these different things, and I'd mess them up and don't know what to do with it. And thank God that we have these steps, this 10th step, to be able to handle it. Because what I learned in the 10th step is that I am going to blow it. I am going to make mistakes. Not only am I going to make mistakes, but I am going to be at any time selfish, dishonest, resentful, and afraid. It could come like that. All I got to do to get one of those 4 things is think about something for a little bit too long. That's all I got to do. All I got to do is just get to thinking too much about something. And the next thing you know, one of those things will grab a hold of what my thinking is, and I'm down the damn road somewhere. And how do I get myself out of that? I can't. I can't. So the idea, the spiritual pride in that is that I've been sober for a couple years, I've been sober for a year, or I've been sober for any whatever length of time it is, I'll be all right. And what did Bob say? We should get a plaque that says, I'll be all right. It's when you're jumping off the cliff, it says, I'll be all right. Right? Which is such an amazing way to put it, because I promise you, we say that sometimes. You be all right. I'll be all right. And it's not true. I'm not going to be able to will my way through resentment and fear and selfishness and dishonesty. I'm not going to will my way through alcoholism, no matter how long I've been sober. And so the opposite, the opposing force, do you know what the opposing force of that is? Is I want everyone to think I'm doing good. I want everybody to think I'm walking on water and I got it all together and so forth and so on. It's just my arrogance and my pride and my ego. My selfishness wants you to think I'm great. You see? And so I got this cool thing called pride. And pride, how it works is when I am not doing what I'm supposed to do, or I'm harboring one of those things and I don't feel well about myself as a result of it, because I'm trying to will my way away from these resentments. I'm trying to will this fear off of me, and it's not working. And so then I'm back into this pitiful, incomprehensible, demoralizing wheel of nowhere, Groundhog Day, because that's what I did when I was drinking. Now I'm doing it with the same things, but I'm doing it sober now. And so what happens is when I'm fighting and I'm trying to get it off of me, and I'm failing and I'm failing and I'm failing, start to feel less about myself. And when I feel less about myself, to some degree subconsciously, what I am going to use as the tool is pride. I'm going to pull up the shield of pride or the sword of pride, and I'm going to puff up, and I'm going to try to be more than I really am. and it's going to get me jammed up. It just makes for more. It just simply makes for more. So if you're an alcoholic, I don't want to put measuring sticks on it, but we'll just say, like the big book describes, you're going to get selfish, you're going to get resentful, you're going to get dishonest, and you're going to get afraid. And it might happen every single day. It will probably happen every single day. Every day. Not once a month. Right? Who's been running on a 29-day streak of no resentment, selfishness, or fear in here? Gage? And you guys see where I'm going with this. It's daily. It's a daily, one day at a time. You see? When I say that, you see, now Rachel got me thinking about it. Rachel is picking us, everybody got their own little thing they say, and she says, my thing that I say is you see. And so now when I say it, I'm like aware of it.
I like it.
So it's a daily practice. So I want to encourage you once again, as a recap from last week, with the 10th step. The 10th step is not in the morning or not in the night or not in the middle. It's all the time. It's a way of life. Right? It's a way of life. And what's the bonus of it? The bonus of it, when it talks about that, it says our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. You're not going to grow in understanding and effectiveness as fast or in an appropriate rate if you got 1/10 step every 30 days. You're not going to learn about yourself. You're not going to learn how alcoholism's whooping on you. You're going to miss it, and you're going to slow it down. You're going to slow your progress. If you stay sober by doing a 10 step once a month, I don't know if I would make it. I would go crazy. So I want to encourage you to be aware of that. Whatever stigma, whatever your disease is telling you, whatever alcoholism and your pride or your arrogance or your selfishness, your alcoholism, the same alcoholism I got, wants to tell me the same thing it's going to try to trick you with is that I'll be all right. I don't really got to do this. Or maybe you don't have people who understand. Well, you got people here in this room who do understand. So get with women, find you some ladies. I know I talk about that a lot. The ladies, I couldn't begin to describe the dilemma that the ladies have in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not a lady, so I don't know. But I know that there is a difference. And it's not neither good nor bad. It's just simply different. And there's just, maybe it's simply to say there's just more men in AA. I don't know. But women seem to have a little bit of a difficulty, it seems to me, in finding, I could see me and the fellows can have a chat and we could talk about things, and it seems to be, to some degree, I would have to say simple. It may not be simple, but it seems simple in light of what I see Rachel or the other women go through. Does that make sense? It just seems different, and I don't know. I can't I can't sit here and begin to. I don't want you to think that I'm a professional at that, because I'm not. I don't know. I just know there's a difference. I just know it. I can see, it's very easy to see. And so, like I said, the one day a few weeks ago, it would be, if all it takes is a couple women. You get a couple women, you guys get to just grinding it out. You'll change the women. It'll make a big difference in the community. I promise you. You're going to face opposition. I guarantee it. You can't take a stand for nothing in this world and not deal with some opposition. And people don't like change just as much as I don't like change like the other guy. It's going to happen. But boy, you guys would save a lot of lives if you did that. A lot. Clay?
Yeah, so on 10, I'm going back here a little bit, but just want to make sure. So you have a day, and about your day, you have any selfishness, dishonest, resentment, fear. Pick up the phone.
The big book gives us a pretty clear-cut suggestion on what we're to do. It says when these crop up, we do this. We ask God to remove them at once. We discuss them with someone immediately. We make amends quickly, and then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Why? Because love and tolerance of others is our code. If I'm resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid, love and tolerance is not going to be my code. I am not going to be capable of love and tolerance in an effective way that I'm supposed to, because I'm going to be consumed with my own self. And so that we talked about that last week. The mistakes I've made there would be asking God to remove it, not telling somebody, or telling somebody and not asking God to remove it. And those are some mistakes I've made. And so, yes, can I be loving and tolerant? Is God able to use my defects of character for good? Absolutely, God is capable of doing it. I've seen him do it. He still will use us. There's another quote in another place that says, God's gifts are without repentance. You guys understand that? That God has a plan for you, that God has a purpose for you, and whether you participate in that or not, God's plan is still going to get used through you. And what God's plan is always some love and helping somebody else in the community. And so no matter what your level of participation is, your gift and being able to do that is without you doing anything. And it's kind of like we had on Thursday night. The most greatest things I've seen God do for me and through me are things I don't always remember. I don't remember. I don't know. And how I've been able to be aware of that is because several people have come to me and thanked me for things that I have no idea what they're talking about. And so my only conclusion, because it's happened quite a bit, is that on those days when that happened, I must have been just dialed in right. I must have been in a fit spiritual condition in just enough way that God was able to demonstrate through me what he can do. And it had little or nothing to do with me. And the idea, the human thought, the arrogant, selfish, alcoholic thought of that, well, I want some credit for it. But when I'm in them places and I don't remember, and people are saying thank you, and I know that God used me, I promise you it's more fulfilling than any accomplishment I've ever had. Anything I've ever done on my own is just, God was the creator of everything, used me for the good of somebody else. It's a big deal. Does that answer your question, Clay? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to read you something on the step 11. A couple things, and we're going to discuss it. Whoops. Those of us who have come to make regular use of prayer would no more do without it than we would refuse air, food, or sunshine. And for the same reason, when we refuse air, light, or food, the body suffers. And when we turn away from meditation and prayer, we likewise deprive our minds, our emotions, and our intuitions of vitally needed support. As the body can fail its purpose for lack of nourishment, so can the soul. We all need the light of God's reality, the nourishment of his strength, and the atmosphere of his grace. To an amazing extent, the facts of AA life confirm this ageless truth. And so just like we were talking about that God can still use me, because I do believe that his gifts are without repentance, that God is bigger than me, and despite my condition or where I'm at spiritually, God's will always be done. I do believe that I could become a willing participant in that will of God. I really do. And I really believe that is extremely rewarding. And what I know for sure through failure and through error and through suffering and through every once in a while getting it right, is that I cannot experience that in its wholeness without prayer and meditation. Prayer and meditation have, well, you've heard it said in the meetings, I forgot to say, I can tell the difference when I say my prayers in the morning and don't. There's not been many days in my sobriety where I've missed prayer and meditation first thing in the morning. There have been days through circumstances or through vacation or some weird places and things that I end up doing that I kind of get away from it a little bit, or I have to take a walk after breakfast or something like that, but I nevertheless still do it. But you can tell we've all failed in that place enough to know what it's like to not do it, and how different our thinking is and how different our perception of our problems are. You see, and when I'm close to the Creator, there's a great amount of security. And the security that I become aware of, almost, it's 100% spiritually, but to some degree, it's also consciously. We have a conscious contact with God, is what our literature would say. And when I'm conscious of His presence and His power, then these things in life that come up, they're not such a big deal because the Creator of the universe got my back. Now, when I got financial problems and I'm not doing prayer and meditation and I got relational problems and I'm away from the Creator, then these problems are bigger than me. And now they're overwhelming. A problem that God could, if I'm in fit spiritual condition, these problems, they'll flow right by me. Tune, 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 tune. I just keep on going. But when I'm away from that power, then I have to take care of the problem because God's not going to. Right? Because when I'm away from that consciousness, then problems of this world are mine to manage. And when I manage, I damage. Right? And so the problems that in being close to the Creator, where the problems of this world seem to be like nothing. But the problems of the world left to my own to figure out are overwhelmingly, almost handicapping, destroying. There's too much to bear. Too much to bear. And so no matter how far we get away from that, or no matter how distant we become or find ourselves in Alcoholics Anonymous from that power, the cool thing is we always got a path. We always got a path to get back to, no matter what's going on. Get back on. Usually the hard times, the things like that would drive us to take some action, and we usually find that my relationship with God to some degree has gotten off base. And so I got this problem over here, and this problem seems like it's the whole world to me, and the people in AA would tell me, hey, don't look at the problem no more. Let's look at the solution, which is, in the human finite mind, contradictory to what I want to do. Matter of fact, it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. With my human mind, you're telling me I got the bills are due tomorrow. You know what I mean? I'm gonna kill her today. You know what I mean? And these problems are right here, right now. And what you tell me, what my sponsor would tell me, is what our literature would tell us, and what we're going to tell each other is, don't focus on the problem. Focus on the solution, and the problems seemingly take care of themselves. I don't know if the problems take care of themselves. That's what we think. What happens is God takes care of them for us. But to be able to go through life, Jan? Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. If anybody's gotten from me a message that, hey, if you do this, you're going to be skipping through life and never have any problems, that's not the truth. The reality is life is still going to show up. You're going to go through things. There's been some things in my sobriety that happened when I was very well that just rocked me. Broken relationships they're tough. Major financial crisis and job loss. And when you lose somebody, the big book would say pomp, calamity of worship, or other things are always going to obscure my relationship with God. There's a Bible verse that says God is close to the brokenhearted. Do you believe, let me ask you this question, do you think the brokenhearted know that God is close? 9 times out of 10, the brokenhearted feel their brokenheartedness. 9 times out of 10, the brokenhearted are focused on their broken heart. 9 times out of 10, the brokenhearted are feeling their broken heart. Does that change the closeness of God because you don't know it? The promise of God is that He's close. You see? The promise of God is that He is close to the brokenhearted. And so the brokenhearted usually don't know, they don't feel that necessarily, but it's a fact of the matter, nevertheless. And so just like Jan was saying, sometimes you'll have to go through and get through, and you can have some hindsight, and you'll be able to see how God got you through. Go ahead, Jan, you got something else? Absolutely. I believe that 100%. And so everything that we're always going to be learning and growing in our sobriety and a relationship with God, none of us are masters of it, I don't think. And we're going to learn. And what I found in that all my, I got very resentful of God in my sobriety a few times because I've had some crisis happen. And I didn't understand what did I do to deserve this? And so the responsibility there was that thinking itself was my responsibility. Maybe it's just life. Maybe you just have to deal with life like everybody else, but now you have to be mature and still go to work and do the things you're supposed to do and see how God can show up for you even in that. You see? So yeah, 100%, Jane, I agree with you. Chris?
It just made me think of earlier today, I was on my way up here, and I was letting some frustration out because, according to me, by my standards, my rehearsal was horrible. At least I thought so. And the way it was like, are you wearing a button shirt? It's it. And so here you do, and he's looking over here, it's like, oh, great. And what that shows me, I don't like putting expectations on others, but I found myself not only having expectations of one of my castmates, but even higher expectations of me. And I'm like, what? Uh-oh. So as soon as you started talking about that whole expectation thing and whatnot, it reminded me of one of the ladies said that we pause when we're agitated. And at that moment, I didn't pause, I just let it out. And I'm telling on myself because, for the beginners, because we're going to go through things like that. And sometimes we hold it in and it ain't going to do us no good, but we also have to remember that, well, we're still in the room for improvement, right, Mike?
That's right, buddy. Thank you, Chris. Steve.
So last night I heard the speaker say something about, he said the same thing. Like he was asking God, he was like, what am I doing wrong? And God gave him an answer and said, well, what are you doing right? And so more often than not, as far as being an alcoholic and Alcoholics Anonymous, I need to be doing more to get outside of myself. I mean, I'm not in the same situation, but for me, I need to be doing more. I'm called for more, or so I've learned. And if I want to get away from stinking thinking or not feeling the closeness of God, then I should be doing more to get outside of myself in my own recovery. Or he even said something last night about participating in your own recovery.
Yeah.
And that's the best experience I've gotten out of situations like that, where I feel like nothing's going right, but I feel like I'm doing everything the right way or what I'm suggested to do, and then I just need to be doing more. There's more opportunity that I'm just not taking advantage of.
Yeah.
And I'm separating myself from that, and then I feel empty or not as close to somebody's spirit.
Yeah, and we're gonna next week. We're gonna wrap this workshop up with talk that's gonna be just exactly about how Steve kind of talked about. We're gonna talk about our responsibility and what it looks like, being rescued from the yawning jaws of death and what that requires for us. And so, just because did somebody else have their hand up, Corey?
Yeah, so I think kind of a breakthrough on some of this stuff as far as like to use the solution against my
Yeah. Thank you, Corey. I really believe that our Bill is the writer of our big book and the early people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then, 15 years later, we have this 12 by 12. And so their combined experience and to giving us even a 10th step is, I really believe they must have known that we were going to try to do it ourselves. They must have known as alcoholics, they've seen the common characteristic of our selfishness and our arrogance and our just overwhelming idea that we can manage everything. And they give us this this 10th step to give us a little bit of a warning maybe. Like, this is going to happen. You're going to get selfish, dishonest, resentful, and afraid. It's going to happen. And here's what we do about it. Don't do it your way. Here, let me give you a simple 1, 2, 3. Let's keep it simple, just like the steps. Boom, 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 boom. I really believe that. We're always, if you're an alcoholic, just like you're going to try to do it yourself. Some people learn from their mistakes, and wiser people learn from others. And if look at both. When we've tried to manage these things on our own, did it work? Did it work? Clay, you had your hand up? Oh. Oh, Johnny, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to throw this out there. I use this every day. It's right on page 86. We have those morning and evening prayers laminated down at the intergroup office. I don't know if anybody else avails themselves to that, but when I go down to the cask, AKA Glenwood Jail, I'm taking all the literature that I can, but I'm always giving those prayer cards out to guys. I think that, and it's talking about that same exact stuff. I'm praying that prayer every day, and just trying to get God working in my life, in those issues. I mess up and don't say the nighttime prayer as often as I do the daytime prayer,
Yeah.
morning prayer. But I was just throwing that out there, it's another way of utilizing prayer and meditation.
Thank you, Johnny. He's absolutely correct. And so, which brings me kind of back to our big book. And so the big book, after it wraps up the 10th step promises, it's going to read this. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. That vital sixth sense that I know that the problems I have, just like we were talking about, that God is bigger than if you have a problem that's bigger than God, you're screwed. If you have a problem in your life, whether today or any time in your sobriety, that's bigger than God, you are screwed. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. And here's how our 11th step is going to open up. Pay attention to this. It's pretty important. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We should not be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and we work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. And the first thing it says here, when it gives us that summary, or that it's prepping us for something, and this is what it's prepping us for. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. And so it's crazy, and the 12 by 12 is going to relate how this prayer and meditation inventory all go together. And it all mixes for a real wholesome way of being, you see? And so if you would think of, if we all would take a little paper or whatever, and we did a little consensus in here, and we said, what makes you feel closest to God? What is it? And some people would say prayer, and some people would say meditation, and some people would say service work, or some people would say hiking or whatever, helping other people, so forth and so on. Those things all would fall into that category. But in order to be of maximum service and be helpful and be used and to practice principles in all my affairs, it is going to require, whether I like it or not, no matter how I feel about it, it is going to require prayer and meditation. I am going to be the most effective. I'm going to be used at my capacity without draining me when I'm tapped into that power, when I'm conscious of the Creator. I'm going to be able to way more effectively even be able to perceive the situations in life, whether they're at work with the boss or the employees or at the Circle K when you're in line to get, a pack of Marbs and there's 4 people with they're doing scratch offs and it's taking forever, whatever. Yeah. Sorry, I went on a. When we retire now, we constructively review our day. So, some of the things that we've been doing recently with the fellas is there's these new apps. I'm not a promoter of any of the apps or anything like that. I'm not a promoter of any of that, but I found that the tools in some of the apps are very effective for this 10th nightly review. And to some degree, what we've been doing is we've been sending them to each other. Some guys have been doing better than others, and I do better sometimes than I do. My sponsor asked me to send him every night, because I told him sometimes I slack on this nightly review. And so he said, I want you to send it to me every night. Email it to me. And so I use one of the apps. It's just a little check. Was I selfish? I check yes on that thing, and the first thing that happens is, bloop, a big old box comes up for me to write in there what it is. It's a trap. It's a trap. And so I go, oh gosh, and I got to write it. And I write it in there, I type it. Next question. As soon as I check yes, bloop, box pops up, type it in. And then at the bottom of that, there's a button and it says share. You don't have to do that. It does not say go on your new iPhone or whatever, your new technology in 2025. They didn't write it in 1939 that you're to do that. I just found it to be very helpful. Very, very helpful. Some accountability around this stuff is vitally important because the idea that 11th step is to some degree mystic. It's mystic, meaning we don't all do it. We wonder if we're doing it good enough, if we're doing it well enough, and all that we just left to our own. When we try to assume or grade our papers, we're not going to grade it right. We're going to be way too good or we're not going to be good enough. And it's not asking us to grade, it's asking us to just simply do it. Where was I resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do I owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others? Or of what we could pack into the stream of life? This is the nightly review. You go through your day and you review your day. And it's going to give us a couple things. It's going to say, we're careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. If you have beaten yourself to a pulp with inventory to such a place where you are a worthless crumb bum, you're not going to be wanting to be all helpful. It's not effective. The word is that it starts out as we constructively review our day. Now, here's what happens. When I see guys that I sponsor, because somebody taught me this, when I see guys that I sponsor and they're constantly beating themselves to death with their inventory and they're overanalyzing or whatever, and they're just coming up short all the time, I remind them of the constructively. And so what I have them to do is I know the big book doesn't need no adding or no taking away from me, but just to make it constructive, it's just no different than a car alignment. If your alignment is off and it's pulling to the left, you have to hold the steering wheel a little bit to the right to make it go straight. And so what I have them to do is look for some things in the day that they've done that was good. And I have them to write it down in their night review so they're not beating themselves up. It's not the intention. Our intention is to be free of these things that block us from God. That's the intention on a daily basis. And if I ask the question, in light of what God has done for us individually, are we spending enough time with Him? Or are you, like me, taking credit for your sobriety at times? in light of all the times we tried before and failed and tried before and failed and busted our head against the walls and failed and got worse. And every time I manage, I'm damaged. And all of a sudden, things are going a little bit good for me in sobriety. Am I taking credit for it? That's a trick. The temptation that's inevitably gonna happen. And so I just want to, if we could be conscious of this collectively, that God, what's the 12? The Father doeth the works. If I was going to be good, and now if I was going to have a couple dollars in my pocket, if I was going to have my driver's license, I would have did it on my own. Right? I would have long did it on my own. You see? When I got sober, folks, and I know this is not some of your experience, but I got sober in an abandoned basement in West Akron, and I didn't even own a toothbrush. And the arrogance, the alcoholic arrogance in me to take credit for my sobriety is overwhelming. And so I know I'm an alcoholic, and I know if that happens to me, and if you're an alcoholic, it happens to you. And it may not be in that exact same way, but it'll be in a way similar. And so I asked that question because this step is suggestion, conscious contact. We talked about last week, if you were, everybody in here right now was to think about their last 2 weeks of their life. What 5 things have you been unwilling to give up in the last 5 weeks for a better relationship with God? Think about it. Is it money? Is it my nightly reviews? Calling my sponsor? Doing my 10 steps? Being honest about some secret stuff I got going on? Is it prayer? Or is it your hobby? Is it work? What 5 things in the last 2 weeks of your life have you been unwilling to give up for a better relationship with God? Think about that. We can all write them down. I would suggest you do that exercise. Write it down. God's not going to punish you for it, but it's certainly good to be aware of it. I promise you. Now, let me ask you another question. If you have, who in here has kids? Mostly everybody. If you took the time that you spent with God this week, and you, in that time that you come up with, if there was a button that checked in and the clock watch started going, and all the time you spent with God this week, every time you clicked it, it built up. And if you got 7 days worth of time you spent with God, whatever that number would be, if you gave that number to your kids, would your kids think you loved them? You understand? If you could only spend the time that you spent with God, and that was all the time you were allowed to spend with your kids, just for consideration. I'm not asking you this to beat yourself up or anything like that. I'm intending for this to be a loving thing. I really mean that. And if it's been said before that God's greatest purpose for all of us is he sends us out to do things. I know that for sure. But if I believe, and you don't have to believe this, but I believe that God's greatest purpose for me, that God created me to be in relationship with him more than anything else. More than go feed the hungry people, more than help alcoholics, more than anything else there is. The number one thing would be in relationship with him. And out of that relationship, through this work, I can do the things that are suggested of me to do. That's the intention here. It's not, I don't want you to beat yourself up with these things. Think about how much time you spend with God. Is it enough? You see? After making our review, we ask God for forgiveness. Meaning, yeah, God, I was selfish. No, I was thinking about myself most of the day. Average human being, we've talked about this before, has around 50,000 thoughts a day. How many of those 50,000 thoughts were about you? Was you thinking about yourself most of the day? And when you find these things, what I found to be the miracle in the 11th step, the miracle in the 11th step is that I blow it regularly. I blow it. And when I pray the prayer, God, please show me what corrective measures need to be taken. We inquire what corrective measures need to be taken, meaning I'm asking God, we ask his forgiveness. God, forgive me for being mean at Circle K. Forgive me for being short with them. Please show me what corrective measures need to be taken. The miracle in the 11th step is God comes alongside of me and he does 90% of what it is to do to make things right. He changes my perception. He softens my heart. He encourages me. He doesn't bust out his belt and whip me like I think he's going to do. He loves on me. He loves me into the corrective measures. It's overwhelming. It's incredible. It's amazing. Somehow, some way, his ways are better than my ways and bigger than all our thoughts all combined together. God has an infinite and powerful and ultimately loving way of helping us, when we do this, correct the things we found were wrong with a tenderness and a gentleness, but a very, very powerful way, which is the miracle of the 11th step. You will not experience that if you're not doing it. And in order for me to have that relationship of even more trust and more faith and so forth and so on, I have to participate in these exercises so I can see I can go in a little bit further in my relationship, right? Then it goes on to say, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. When we wake up, we think about the 24 hours ahead. Consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. It's given us some real simple things to do. It's just some clear-cut suggestions. You see? The big book, I do want to say this. Our book was meant to be suggestive only. That's a quote out of the big book. And that has got taken to the 10th degree. Meaning, the book was meant to be suggestive, but it ain't. Or they wouldn't tell you it was meant to be suggestive. They would not tell you that if it was just a suggestion. Our book was meant to be suggestive, but it ain't. They're giving us clear-cut directions here. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonesty, or self-seeking motives. It's going to give us more things to do. I can't tell you the amount of times where I've found myself, I've lost something, and I pause and ask God for a right thought or action. God, please, I can't find my keys. Will you help me? Oh my gosh, I'm late. I got to hurry up. And I just stop for a second and I'll find my keys. I'll be at work and I'll be having a situation where I just can't figure it out. And I'll stop. God, please, I need a right thought or action, intuitive thought or action. And if I pray the prayer and I listen, which is meditation, if I just, God, and I just stop for a second. Sometimes it comes like this. Sometimes I'll just go about my next move and then the solution will appear. To be able to know, to walk through life for us, to be able to walk through life with these kind of tools, with this ability to tap into a resource that's infinite, we'd be fools not to do it. Right? Let me put it a different way. So why don't we do it? Why don't we do it all the time? Well, because we're alcoholics and we're selfish and we're self-centered and we're arrogant and we're egotistical. That's why. You see? That's why we do it. We're up against ourselves. But if we practice this, discipline, practice, discipline, it gets better and it gets to be more. I want to read you something else. As beginners in meditation, we may now reread this prayer several times very slowly. That prayer is the prayer of St. Francis is what they're referring to here. We might reread this prayer several times very slowly, savoring every word and trying to take in the deep meaning of each phrase and idea. Meaning, Lord, I'm going to just give you the first sentence of the prayer. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. Make me a channel of thy peace. I mean, you could sit in meditation on that for, just thinking of the wording of that is almost overwhelming. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. Why? Because I'm thinking about myself. I'm up against me. And I hear my voice in my voice, right? I think it's me. What about the Our Father prayer? You guys ever read the Sermon on the Mount? The Our Father prayer starts with that. Our Father. Our Father. Our Father. There's 8 billion people in the world. Our Father. Whoa. Our Father? Whew. That's a lot. And we're so consumed with ourself and our selfishness and our self-centeredness because we're alcoholic. It's not really us. We're alcoholic, and it's constantly trying to divert us from this. But we have a God that's so loving and so powerful and so patient. He even blesses us when we blow it. But boy, what would our lives look like if we did this every day? What would our lives look out? I guarantee you get sent out. You're going to get sent out to do things that you would never dream or imagine. I promise. And that is going to be where you're going to find your most fulfillment. I guarantee it. As beginners in meditation, we might now reread this prayer several times very slowly, savoring every word. Our Father. And trying to take in the deep meaning of each phrase and idea. It will help. Listen to this. It will help if we can drop all resistance to what our friend says. For in meditation, debate has no place. We rest quietly with the thoughts of someone who knows so that we may experience and learn. We can read all this stuff, and I can go through every line, and we can talk about every line, and I think it's important information, and we've covered it decently. There's more in there I would suggest for you to read it. But boy, did they sum it up really well here. For in meditation, debate has no place. Grab hold of this. We rest quietly with the thoughts of someone who knows so that we may experience and learn. When you meditate, when you pray, and then you sit quietly, however your meditation practice looks like, whatever, form that it takes, I would suggest that you sit quietly. Use your breathing into the nose, out through the mouth. Helps me to sit upright. When I lay down and meditate, I go to sleep. I sit upright. I try to hold my hands like this. I breathe in through my nose, and I breathe out through my mouth, and I let God see my heart. That's been my prayer since the early days of my sobriety. God, please see my heart. God, please see my heart. And I know there's assurance inside of me, or a belief that I have, that if God just looks at my heart, it'll become to be better. It'll be better. All he has to do is look there, and it gets better. You see? And so whatever form or practice that you decide to use in your meditation, I want you to be aware that your thoughts are still going to come. And if you think that because when you go to meditate and you're thinking, you're going to say, I can't do it. I can't stop thinking. Well, I want you to know that it's normal for you to think. You've been thinking your whole life. You're an alcoholic. Your thoughts are you're just insane. You're going to think. You're going to have thoughts. I promise you. Do not allow that to deter you from doing it. Do it anyway. Practice it. Breathe. Breathe loud. Breathe heavy. Whatever you got to do. Put the song on. There's so many different things we could do. We used to have the chapels. We have chapels. I have to go sit in the St. Thomas Chapel and just sit in the quiet. There's chapels all around. There's all kinds of different things that another thing the 11th step says, and I wanted to hit this, I just don't got time for it. Be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they have to offer. Be quick to see where they're right. What do? We're the quickest to see where they're wrong. There's not a better group of people in the world than alcoholics can see where the religious people are wrong at. We're masters of it. If the religious people need a census, they need to call us. The big book tells us to be quick to see where they're right. That's contrary to what we want to do. That's not what my ego wants to do. My ego wants to find out where they're wrong. And not only does it say, be quick to see where they're right, it says, make use of what they have to offer. Make use. There's so many millions of meditation books. A lot of guys we read, a lot of us read, I encourage you to read a few that I think that are very powerful. The Echoes of Eternity is an amazing, amazing book. We have daily reflections and 24-hour books and all these different meditation books that has a meditation for the day. Use it. Those things are great, but I think in our big book, when it says to meditate, what it always is, we inquire what corrective measures need to be taken. How am I going to do that? I have to listen. I have to listen. God, I blew it. What can I do to make it right? God, see my heart. And he gives me the answer. I wish I could sit here and say, oh, I'm a great meditator. I'm like Buddha, but I ain't. I promise you. When I wake up in the morning, I can get some coffee and fire up a marb and get to read my books. That's just what I do. But I do it every day. You see? And I've learned, and my meditation has not taken on no great length of time, but what my meditation, I'll tell you how it's grown. Over the years, it's grown that I don't just do it in the morning or the night. I do it all the time. That's the difference. That's what there's how I've evolved in meditation. Now it's a thing that I could do when I'm driving down the street or I'm at the job or I'm in the chapel or wherever I'm at on the lake fishing. At any given time, I can do this and listen to the Father. Anytime. It don't have to be a set time. If you got to be a set time for it, then let it be a set time. But I've learned that it's all the time. You see? Sorry, Rachel, I said it again. All right, any questions? Let's pray it out. Oh, hey, Steve got 2 years somehow.
I meditated.
And you listened, didn't you?
I asked him what corrective measures to take.
Yeah. It's funny that meditation I brought up, the Echoes of Eternity, the name of the book is Listening to the Father. Mm-hmm. You know that? Yeah. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.